presentation. So for now, I just want to welcome everybody and say hello and thank you for joining us today. We have Courtney Yarholer, our project manager here at the OJJDP Tribal Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center, myself, Anna Clough, and Dave MacArthur and Kelly Phillips joining us from White Earth Nation. And I wanted to take a minute to let you know a little bit more about Dave and Kelly. Dave MacArthur is currently the manager of the 4 youth programs on White Earth Nation's tribal youth programs. He manages the Duly Involved Youth Program, Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, Circle Back Substance Abuse Program, and he has also served for over 20 years in law enforcement with tribal and state court systems. In the past, he served as a chief of police, reserve deputy, county sheriff's office officer, a correctional officer in 911 dispatch, and in many other tribal capacity services for judicial systems. Kelly Phillips is currently the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court case manager. He is the White Earth Substance Abuse Intensive Outpatient Youth Counselor. He serves as an adult counselor aide for adults and also the White Earth Harm Reduction Coalition. He has 15 years of experience in the substance abuse field, and he has an associate's degree in human services and serves as a drug and alcohol counselor. So thank you to both of them for joining us today and for taking the time to share their experiences working with the tribal youth at White Earth Nation. And I'm going to hand it over to Courtney Yarholer now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, we're so grateful that you're able to join us. And as we like to do when we come together and we begin an event or come together from multiple nations across Indian country, we like to do what we call starting and opening in a good way. And to do that, it gives us an opportunity to try to come together we're in a like mind and thinking together. And so as we begin this discussion and this short journey today, so I'd like to invite you to share along with us, to share this experience. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like to invite you to think about somebody that has influenced your life. So think about where you are in your life, professionally, personally, and how the path that you have taken to get to where you are today. And like many of us, there's been a lot of people that have encouraged us along the way, in one way or another. So I ask you that you take a moment to think about and appreciate those people. Think about somebody that made an impression on you or encouraged you along your path. And now you're here today doing the same, working, committing yourself to the tasks, to the issues, to this work, so that you can have an influence and impact on another person's life and our young people. And so I want to take a moment for us to think about those that have encouraged us and honor them. So now that you've thought about somebody, I ask that you think about, if you could sum that feeling up, how they made you feel in that encouraging word, if you can sum it up in one word, what would that word be? And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to invite you to type your word into the chat box so that we can all see that word of encouragement. And we offer it to one another as saying, this is honoring the person that encouraged me, and it's something maybe that we want to try to continue to do for youth. So in one word, we have fearless. That's good. Empowerment. Thank you. Thank you. Perseverance. Great. Giving. So as we think about it, we take that time, think about what they give to us. So, balance, honorable. How did they make you feel in one word? So, grace. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for participating in our little activity here. But think about these words as we begin this journey today and have this discussion and recognize that we all come to this place and Creator made a way for us to be here to have these discussions and learn from one another. And through this encouragement, it's something that's shared amongst our people and that we want to try to continue to support for our young people moving forward. So, as well as ourselves. So we think about that self-care also. So thank you for honoring us with your words of encouragement. So, all right, I'm turning it back over to Anna.
Thank you, Courtney. And I know that we all have those people in our lives that have given us the encouragement that we've needed to do the work that we're doing today, and so I appreciate all of you sharing. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, if you haven't gotten to listen in on the Strategic Planning Toolkit webinars, we invite you to see some of the other staff who have provided many resources through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Training and Technical Assistance Center for our tribal youth programs, and we want to thank our partners and everyone else who has provided much assistance to our programs. Today we're going to be talking with the White Earth Nation Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court staff, Dave MacArthur and Kelly Phillips, and we are so thankful to them for sharing their wisdom. We know that experience teaches us so much about how to do the work that we're doing, and so we're so thankful to them for taking time out of their schedule to share with everyone that's joined us today. And so we're going to be engaging in dialogue with them, and then towards the end of the webinar is when we will open up for questions. So if you do have questions, make sure and write those down. We are going to open up for questions toward the end of the dialogue, so if you don't hear an answer to a question that's been on your mind, you will have time at the end of this webinar to ask that question. So we're going to get started. Dave and Kelly, thank you for joining us. I wanted to open this up for you to introduce yourself and give us an overview of the White Earth Nation Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court.
Arthur. I work with the Wellness Court up in White Earth, Minnesota, on the White Earth Nation. The population of our tribe is 19,000 members, and we're located just north of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, about 60 miles northeast of Fargo, North Dakota. I guess some of the things I'd like to talk about is our jurisdictional issues we have here is we work with a public law 280 state, where the state has criminal jurisdiction and we have civil regulatory jurisdiction. That's one of the things that we had a hard time when we started up our wellness court is building the relationship between the state, the county, and the tribe. But we've been successful in doing that. So one thing that we did do, we met a lot with the state, and with my history of working with the state, we were able to get a really good working relationship and get in with the county attorneys and develop a really good system here. We've been currently running for about 5 years. We have people on our board from county attorneys, state probation,
mental health, ICW.
Mental health, ICW.
Substance abuse, the judges.
We have quite a few different partners on our board that come to our meetings and help us determine what's best for the kids when they come through our court.
Great. Well, thank you. I know that we're going to move through and get more specific as we move along here. So as far as your court processes go, what are the referral processes for the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court?
Well, our referral process begins in state court through the county attorney and probation, state probation. They'll take the individual. They'll kind of do a pre-screen with us. They'll give us a call and ask us if they think that he will fit the criteria, he or she will fit the criteria before they make the suggestion or recommendation in the state court. At that time, once they make that recommendation in the state court, it gets ordered in their court. This is my thoughts here. They get ordered in state court to attend our program, to go through our programming. So at that point, the probation officers or county attorney will fill out the official referral form and send it to us.
The board meets every week unless we have a crisis. We send emails out to the entire board, and the board has to decide. We'll get the intake form that has come from the probation officer, and we'll all vote on either if they're going to be fit for our program or not. So.
Okay, so once you receive a referral, then your board is going to meet and decide if they are a good fit for the program.
Yeah.
So once they actually come into the program, how do you initially do an intake with them as far as screening?
Well, it's myself and Felicia are the other case managers. We'll decide who's going to be best fit to work with that client, whether it's a boy or male or female. Mm-hmm. We'll go out there, we'll do the introduction with the family, explain our process, go through we have a contract that they'll sign stating that they agree to all the terms of our court, and we get them started from that point on.
Okay. So as far as accepting a participant into the program, what has been some of the most important criteria for qualification?
As soon as they're recommended into our court, we end up doing a mental health diagnostic assessment on them, chemical use assessment. And from that point, if they have a chemical use issue, they pretty much automatically qualify for a court. At that time, we will start working with them, make sure that they get into their inpatient programming and start case managing from that point on.
Okay.
So it's substance abuse issues and legal problems are two criteria for them to come into wellness court.
Okay, so the two main criteria are going to be the substance abuse background and then the mental health screening.
Okay, great. Thank you. You know, as we were talking and preparing our presentation today, you had talked about, once we want to talk about referrals and screenings, you had mentioned the phase system. And so I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and the phase system that you use.
Phase one, we start off the kid, depending on what has brought them into the courts. If we have a kid that is having a hard time staying at home, not coming home, running away, we use the GPS bracelet. The first phase is always house arrest, whether it's with the bracelet or not. The client is not allowed to go anywhere unless it's with the guardian. They have permission from mom or dad, or from either, if they have to contact the case manager, which is either Felicia or I. If they have a legitimate place to go and there's not going to be have to worry about, anybody using drugs or alcohol there, half the time we'll give them permission to go out, give them the time they have to be home, and they call us when they get home. We do compliance checks on them just to make sure that they're home, and that can be done just like a probation officer 24/7 anytime.
We also administer UAs 2 to 3 times a week during that period in the first phase.
Once they get into phase 2, they come up and they get a 9 o'clock curfew. They're taken off house arrest. They're allowed to go out and do what they want, but they must be home by 9 o'clock. Again, we do compliance checks, totally random, to make sure that, keep them honest, that they're home at 9 o'clock. I'd say 50% of the time we have the parent support where, they're completely honest. They'll call us if their kid takes off or whatever, and the other 50%, they're covering for them. So Unfortunately, that's not a given that you have the parent support, but it happens, just not as much as we'd like. Phase 3, once they go into phase 3, we also have incentives along the way. We'll start off with a $50 gift for phase 1, graduating phase 1. For phase 2, they go up to $75. Phase 3, they get an iPod, which is also a good way for them to communicate with us because a lot of kids don't have phones. And phase 4 of graduation is the iPads. But back to phase, where am I at, 2 now? Again, it's the 9 o'clock curfew. Once they've completed that, and each phase is approximately 2 months. Phase 3, they go from 9 to 10 o'clock. Again, we're slowly giving them that freedom to get out there and, anything after 10 o'clock, chances are they're going to be doing something they shouldn't be doing. We came to the conclusion. And we've had pretty good progress with it. Again, compliance checks. Now, say we go out there and the client is not home, we can look at restarting them in that phase, going back a phase, or we can just keep them in that phase and we're going to put them on GPS to make sure, and that's their sanction for that. It can be anywhere from 2 weeks to a month.
Wow.
One other thing that we have, too, is we got a good working relationship with law enforcement. So if the child is on probation and he ends up committing a violation that if he's not listening, he keeps falling out of line, then we're able to utilize our police department to pick him up, and our state probation officer or county attorney will issue a pickup order on him, and we'll hold him a day or two in jail as a consequence, but that's usually the very last resort.
So there's other, you try to use other options before it gets to that point. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah, we try to, sometimes it's the matter of maybe a mental health diagnostic assessment that, right now our mental health team is behind probably close to a month. And sometimes when we get these kids, they're having mental health issues, and that's causing their behavior, which, we tend to try to figure something out until we can get their services offered for them, start getting them going on a good way.
Right. That's good.
Certainly with ASD, I had quite a few kids that have been diagnosed with ASD that have not been diagnosed. And until we get that diagnosis, we're kind of, it's the blind leading the blind because they don't understand. We're holding them to a level that they just can't comprehend.
Right.
So mental health plays a huge role in as far as that because we got to know what we're working with.
Right.
And then in each of our phases, we've developed a cultural component in there too. Just off the top of my head, like the first phase is the migration story. They got to know the migration story, the creation story. They're going to have to know the sweat lodge, the background of why you go to sweat, what you do there. They got to know like smudging, what's it about, what goes on, what kind of ceremonies, different things like that. And at the end, they have to do a presentation to the team before they graduate on what they've learned. So we've implemented a lot of culture into the program, and that seems to have helped, especially with on the mental health side, the sweat lodge.
Yeah.
It seems like the sweat lodge has really, really helped us with the kids who have some mental health issues.
That's great. You mentioned earlier on about when you do get parent support, that helps a lot, and it's really great. I'm wondering, have you seen the cultural pieces, such as the sweat lodge, assist with engaging the parents?
In some cases we have. In some cases we've had the fathers or the mothers have come to the sweat lodge and have participated in the lodge with their children. Most cases up where we're from, it seems like our culture is kind of disappearing, and the families are kind of stretched out from it. But once you get them back into it, you get them back into the lodge, it seems like they develop a good relationship with their kids, and they kind of move forward with that.
Right. So that's good. That's good, because it sounds like you're doing a couple of things there and helping build those family relations and addressing some of the issues with the youth, which are rooted in the home. So.
I know you just walked us through the phases, and we were going to go into what incentives and sanctions do you see that have been show the best outcomes, basically.
We've also, in our phase program, we've also put in fishbowl, is what we call it. If the kid is or the client's doing well, or the child's doing well, they'll come to court that week, or every other week they come to court and they get a fishbowl. They get to reach in and pull out a prize if their behavior is good, and that can range from a $25 gift up to whatever. It can be whatever you want it to be. And that's really helped. The kids really enjoy that. They come in, they're able to pull a prize for doing well, and they kind of get rewarded right away. A lot of our sanctions, we started sanctions from, as little as writing a paper all the way up until going to jail to 72-hour hold. One thing like Kelly brought up was the FASD and some of the problems that we have with kids who are diagnosed with that. So now we've implemented a system to where our case managers can do an instant sanction on the child's behavior, because the kids that do have FASD or some of these issues, by the time they come to court in 2 weeks, they kind of forgot what they did wrong. So we gave the power to our case managers to where they can sanction them right away, right when they catch them doing that behavior. And then they just advise their teams through email of what they made or their decision that they made.
Okay.
And one other thing that Dave did mention about our referral process is that we have, right now we currently have 4 different counties. We're working with schools in 4 different counties that also utilize us. So where even if the client hasn't been in trouble, if they have somebody that's, I don't know, what are some instances? Borderline, we got truancy issues, they can come up for that. We got truancy, we got fighting. If it doesn't make it, it's not quite a court problem yet, or a chargeable legal offense, I guess. They'll still contact us and see if we can help work with them, and we've brought in those kids on. I guess that would be the conversion.
So
but it does help out working with us on that.
Trying to do preemptive outreach before they hit the point of needing to go into an actual monitoring phase.
And that's kind of a diversion program that we came up with to work with the schools. We're trying to catch them a little bit earlier before they end up getting in trouble with the law. So we've been fortunate enough to where our schools have put us in their disciplinary teams. So if a child's looking at getting, and we do it the same way that we do for court. If they successfully complete that diversion program, then their suspensions or whatever discipline they're going to get from the school will be forgotten, or it'll be removed from their permanent record, so it doesn't follow them through for when they're filing to try to get into college someday or whatever. So we're trying to set something up in the schools too, so we can get to the kids a little bit earlier.
Wow. So really doing that outreach and building meaningful partnerships with the school seems to be very important.
Yes, it's probably one of our best assets of this court system is working with the schools, because there's kids that just as an example, we had one kid that was in the school and he had a few issues, and we ended up sitting down talking with him, and he ended up telling us that he was homicidal, and he was a gang member. He wanted to, he was a teacher, he planned on shooting in a dad and aunt and a child in the school, another kid in the school, and he ended up drawing me a map and showing me where he had his sawed-off shotgun hidden. that he was going to bring to school and shoot the teacher and the kid with. So that diversion, working with the kids in the schools and stuff like that is, just right there is payback. It's an important piece.
Making yourself available to reach out to youth who really, really need support and mentorship and help. And so that's so important because you're reaching directly into their environment and making yourself available, making those services available to them.
And if the school finds out, we get releases to be in contact with the schools, because if we have clients of ours that are going to school, say in Monoman, if we have wellness kids that are in there, they know that, if they're skipping, if they're acting up, they call us, and us as our first responders, we're going right there and we're talking to them and we're making, we're holding them accountable right away. And again, sending out the emails to the team, letting them know, this kid just skipped, first 3 classes, or he got caught smoking, we're able to help sanction them, and they rely on us for a lot of the kids, I think. Sometimes a little too much, but.
I just kind of want to recognize one thing that I think I observed when you were telling your story about the young man and the shotgun, is that the level of trust it seems that you have earned there with the students just through your presence. I would say that speaks volumes, because without that level of trust, you may not be able to be as successful as you are in diverting some of these actions. And so just wanted to commend you on that and keep up the good work there. So.
And I believe a lot of that comes from the staff that we have here. They're not scared to share their story, and let the kids know, hey, we grew up in not the best way either, but we chose to take a different path, and this is the path you're choosing, and it's going to end up prison. You have a long life where you can choose this path and try to have a more positive way and, get out there and work and help people, And so I think sharing that story and listening to them and answering your phone when they call, they don't have that at home. They don't have parents that pick up the phone and answer when they call, but they have these guys that pick up that phone and are there when they need them. And that really gets a lot of trust. And they share that with other kids, and then the other kids are willing. I mean, I see these case managers going to schools, going different places, and the kids are running them down. Kids that are not even in the program, visiting with them and stuff. So,
right.
I wanted to mention that.
That's great. And yeah, I want to keep, if we can, we're going to keep identifying those and highlighting those. I call them the intangibles. When we're developing programs, we focus a lot maybe on policies or codes or the sanctions and the actual written documents, but there's a lot of the life of the program, the outcomes within those intangibles, like building trust and having consistency and being present. And so I think that's important for people to hear. So.
And that was one of the biggest things that we used when we built our relationships with the counties in the state. When we, myself and Merlin Deegan, when we first got assigned the task of starting this wellness court, we were asked to go, and it pretty much got thrown on our table and just said, start this up because we have a grant. We got to get this, you know what I mean? We got to utilize this money. So at that point, we went to each county attorney. We went and visited with each county attorney in the 3 counties that encompass Whiter and visited them. We visited with the probation officers. They actually sent out letters to the district and district judges and actually got brought in and we were able to present to them during their meeting. And the first thing that we told them when we were there is that we guaranteed them that we stand behind what we said. That if we said that we were going to do something, we were going to do it. And it didn't matter come high water, we were going to do it, And they made their referrals, and we stood by what we said, and we showed them that we were going to be there And we're going to be, you know, like you said, being honest with them and letting them know, hey, there's times that we're not going to be able to do it, but the times we can, we're going to give you everything we got. And once we did that, I would say probably within 6 months we were up to like 10 clients.
Yeah. It's coming down to communication and consistency. So going to the people to communicate what you're trying to do, and then being consistent with what you said you're going to do is the most important things. That's really good.
And then we have this email system, like Kelly was saying, that we put our board is on an email. So every time that we have something going on with our clients, we'll put it out there on email just to let them know, hey, so-and-so skipped school today, like he said. And when we did that, we put our county attorneys and probation officers on there. So they got to see all the work that we were doing working with these kids. And they were seeing that at times, to be honest with you, when I first started this, at times I'd start work at 7 in the morning and I probably wouldn't get home until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And they seen that. They seen that there was someone there that was out going after it and doing what he said he was going to do and keeping them updated in real time. Even at 11 o'clock at night, I was sending out my emails if I was dealing with the kid so they knew. And I think that really helped us, too, in building that relationship.
Exactly. So I see that we had a question that was typed in earlier since we were talking about the cultural components that you brought into the system. Kurt Shuey asked, what does it mean to be involved in the Sweat Lodge, and are talking circles a part of any of the phases?
Our Sweat Lodge, we actually built the Sweat Lodge right on site where our building is here, and we have a cultural, spiritual person that is available at least once a week to do Sweat Lodge for us. We've actually upped it a little bit. We have one Sweat Lodge for the kids, and then we have a Sweat Lodge for staff. So the staff can get in there and kind of shed some of the burdens that they pick up throughout the week. And then I'll let Kelly talk to you a little bit about the talking circles that they implement.
And just as far as being involved in the Sweat Lodge, you know, we try to teach the kids that, you know, if there's a lot of fear going into it, there's a lot of questions resolved. Be a part of the Sweat Lodge. You don't have to go into the lodge. Just being out at the fire is being included, as being involved in it. So that's kind of where we're going with being involved in it, you know. Just getting them out at the fire, helping with the grandfathers, and just, you know, being there is a part of it, whether they're in the lodge or not. As far as the talking circles, yeah, we have implemented that. If we have our substance abuse, which is our outpatient, I'm trying to start every week getting in there with them and starting their meetings off with the talking circle, just to get the kids opening up and seeing the importance of them. We have different crises that have gone on, like at schools and stuff. We've had problems with kids, and we'll have, you know, we'll bring in the teachers, and we, you know, they learn real quick about a talking circle because we do it right there at the school with them. Yeah, it's been a big part of our program.
And we also use talking circles. Like we had a young man that was diagnosed with FASD, and his family was having a hard time with it. So when we got the result of his diagnostic and his screenings and stuff like that, we pulled him in and we did it in the right way. We did it in the talking circle. We broke the news to him, and, you know, it didn't go off that good. The mother was pretty upset, but yet everything was respectful and decent, and we gained a lot of respect and trust from that family. Even though they didn't agree with the diagnosis, they still respected us and hung in there, where I've seen in the past, if you just went and broke them the news, you locked them, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's a great example of infusing and utilizing our kind of cultural approaches. And So that's a great real-life example, and so we thank you for sharing that. I just kind of wanted to follow along this court process that's outlined on our screen. We've hit on just about everything, but I wanted to ask you about aftercare. Once a youth graduates or finishes the program, what aftercare options are available for the youth?
One thing, when they come through the program, when they finish, then we kind of move them into that dually involved youth program where we monitor them for up to 6 months, make sure that they're following their case plans and stuff like that through mental health and chemical dependency. Aftercare, they're able to attend some of the events. We've been opening the building up on weekends now, Fridays and Saturday nights. Those kids are able to come here and work with some of our other youth and some chemical dependency stuff, or just having a safe place to go to hang out with us. But mainly the aftercare is our duly involved youth, just making sure that they're following through with their chemical dependency treatment, any aftercare, anything that they need to do. And then the same way on the mental health, making sure that they're following through and seeing their therapist, continuing on with their care. So we just kind of monitor that for like 6 months, and if they are being successful, then we step back.
And you're working
at that
with,
point.
I mean, it's that program right now where you've actually hired on those guys with speakers.
Yeah, we hired one graduate. Actually, part of our aftercare too, we had one graduate that sustained. She did good for 6 months, and then she wanted to be part of the chemical dependency field. That's what her goal is in life. So we brought her on and hired her through a rural Minnesota STEP program, and we have her here. She's 17 years old, and she's here helping us just clean the building, maintain, different things that she's able to help us with, and just giving her that experience. So when she once decides to move on, she'll have some of those clinical hours or some of those hours that she can use to get her license.
Right.
She's helped out with groups, and she's kind of a mentor for the other kids too, because she's same grade, went to school with 80% of the kids that come through here, and they see, they're coming to group and they're seeing her working here now, and I've heard from a couple of people that they want to, they're using that as their ambition now.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yep.
That's great. So now that we've talked about how, or about what's done, we'd like to talk a little bit about who does it, who does the work, and the team, the composition of your team. So if you could just tell me a little bit about what are the positions, the key positions on your team that kind of make all of this work, and what are some of the most critical positions there, and how do you all work together?
Well, our board consists of county attorneys, county probation, mental health workers, chemical dependency workers, ICW, or Indian Child Welfare. They're on the board. Law enforcement's on the board from Becker County, Monoman County, and Whitehorse Police Department. Our case managers are there. Tola School, Monoman School, and Wabin School are all part of the board. It's just everybody kind of has their equal input. Every professional from every aspect, every professional has their time. If it's a kid comes into the program, he's having a chemical dependency issue, the chemical dependency counselors, they're the professionals, so they step up and let us know what their recommendations are, what they think should be going on with the kid. Then the whole board will talk about it, decide what they should do, and then they move on. Same way as mental health. If they're having some mental health issues, stuff like that, that gets presented to the mental health worker. They give their suggestions on what should be done, and then that's brought and put into that child case plan, or it gets into their court order. So that's the way that runs. Law enforcement there is a supportive role, to where if we need a pickup or we need them to help us with our weekly checks or weekend checks or UAs or alcohol tests, stuff like that, they're there to support us, and they go out and help us do that. They're really good. If we have most of our kids that we have in our program, to be honest with you, are pretty much felons. They've had violent crimes from assault to drugs to arson to all that. So they're sitting up kind of on their last leg in the court systems. So they're able to get picked up and they're able to get placed into a juvenile facility for a weekend or something. So our law enforcement's there and they'll help us go find them. If the kid goes on a run, they'll help us go find him. Just things like that. So
not to burst my own bubble, Dave, but yeah, like you said, it is everybody plays a huge part, and without one, I don't think it would be possible to do what we do. But I have to say that the case managers are really the go-getters. I mean, they're the core. They're doing the running around. They're doing the checks. They're doing, it's their job to let everybody know what's going on. If I get a report from probation, I need to let the team know. If I get a report from ICW, I got to let the team know. If I get, go and do a compliance check and they're not home, you got to let the team know. It's the case manager's job really to keep the team going. But again, it's everybody together. It is one big, there's no I in team.
The case managers are the glue.
They are.
Yeah.
Because it's our fault if we don't get everything out.
Well, and then you just mentioned, I know we wanted to talk about collaboration, and so you have your ICW and other programs within your tribe that are working together to meet the needs of the youth participant, correct?
Yeah. And then we also, I probably jumping back a little bit, but we also get referrals from ICW too, because they're able to provide a consequence for that child if they don't participate in the program. So if they have youth that they're having issues with, like on the run and doing all that kind of stuff, they're able to make a referral into our program, and then they're kind of like the law enforcement side, that they're able to help us with the consequences and make sure that the kids follow through. So ICW has been a really good partner with us.
So as far as working with your partnering jurisdictions, how are you able to develop the formal parts of that, such as MOUs and other agreements?
Yeah, we put together a steering committee actually when we first started this. We had a steering committee that was put together, and everybody was represented from each department in the counties and the state. And then we were able to have our legal department draw up MOUs.
Okay.
And at that point, we got everybody that needed to sign them, all the higher-ups, and that's one thing that we did do. But that steering committee is kind of what set that all up.
Okay, so if you were going to advise a developing program on getting these agreements in place, having a steering committee or a solid advisory committee in place to do this outreach would be good advice?
Yes.
That's really good. I know that we've had a lot of questions about developing those partnerships, and I know that's been a core component of how your program's been operating. So if any of the participants that have questions today were to reach out to you, would you be able to share any examples of the MOUs you've developed?
We should be able to get them. The courts have them now. They keep them on record over there, but we should be able to get a copy of whatever we did and get it out to you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I know that we've had, as far as your jurisdictional issues being in a PL 280 state and having some of those other factors coming into play, I know that we have several programs that are developing that would find those kind of documents really useful. And so just even as a starting point, it would be good to have those on hand just to be able to guide them through that process. So I think we're going to move on into, I know basically what we wanted to do is go through a development process for your court. And so when you initially developed, I know that you had a background in law enforcement, and so was that one of the factors that helped with the initial development of the court process?
Yeah. that was probably one of the best factors there was, because I had worked for Monoma County, I had worked for Becker County, I knew their county attorneys, sheriffs, judges. So yeah, that was a good stepping stone, because I was able to step right in, and they knew my work history, and they knew, that I stood behind what I said, and that was the biggest thing, is just letting them know, hey, we'll be there and do what we need to do. So yeah, being a part of that, those systems really helped us out.
So within the tribe, who was able to provide some of that leadership support to the development of your court?
To be honest, like I kind of said earlier, and the thing, they kind of come in and set it on our table and said, go ahead and get this thing set up, and that's kind of what we did. Our chief of police at the time, Randy Goodwin, he was there. He helped us out quite a bit. He kind of was able to push the buttons where he needed to push the buttons to get the upper council and directors and different ones able to sign MOUs and get them in place. But mainly it was just what you call the grunts. We were the ones that mainly built it from the ground up.
So when you started developing your policies and procedures, who was involved in that initial process?
Our policies and procedures were built by that steering committee, and that was everyone that I had mentioned. It was the county attorneys. They were invited to it. Probation, mental health, ICW, mainly all the worker bees, or what you want to see per se. I guess they all come to the table and they developed it, and then we pitched it to our directors, and then our directors gave us the yes and no's on it, what needed to be changed, and it was presented to legal.
Okay. So you had key involvement from many people on that process, and I know that in preparation for today's call that we had talked about the adaptation of those policies over time. So as you provided services to the youth, you've adapted your policies and procedures just based on experience. Did you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, we were able to, it's kind of like a living document. It's kind of the way I see it. You're going to run into different things that you're like a brick wall. And at that point, you got to find your way around it, and changing your policies and procedures sometimes are what you need to do. I know to begin with, our policy said that we weren't accepting anybody higher than a gross misdemeanor. Well, we weren't getting any referrals. There wasn't enough teeth to get the kids. You know what I mean? There wasn't enough to get them here. Then we pushed back to felonies. Same way with assault, is that if they were assaulted, we weren't going to take them. Well, we had to adapt that and change that. So you got to make that a living document. So when you run into a roadblock, you're able to steer around it.
So are there adult services provided as well at this time, or are you providing only juvenile services?
Well, our department provides just juvenile services, but they are starting an adult wellness court, and they kind of they actually took all of our policies and procedures and everything, and they're using that to build that adult court.
Okay. So if you were going to have a program that was developing, if you're giving them advice, would you have those courts operating separately, or is there still going to be some collaboration on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, like I said, they're in their infancy stage. They haven't really got one up and going yet. But their
first meeting is at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, their first meeting is today at 1 o'clock. But they're I would say that would be a good thing if there's a way that you could incorporate that in with the youth. Maybe some of your adult court stuff. Maybe those offenders have to come back and do a talk with some of your youth and explain to them what they've gone through in their life. You know what I mean? How they were ended up in the prison systems or whatever, and explain to these kids, just to try to explain to them to stay out of trouble. What other thing that Whitehurst has is a family, I believe a family dependency court could have running. And we were just talking today about trying to get involved with that to where we could make referrals to some of our youth and their families into that program, and to see how that would help heal the whole family instead of just trying to heal one kid at a time. Maybe try to take the whole core and try to get them services and help.
Great. Thank you for sharing, because I was getting a lot and taking a lot of notes from what you were saying and trying to read between the lines and hearing. I had one more question before we move to this slide, and it was about your steering committee, or just the process of, the importance of your relationships that you've had and the track record to bring people together and to collaborate. But could you speak just very, very shortly on the importance of having a collected vision to guide that work? So.
I guess you kind of got me stumped on that one. One thing that putting the steering committee and this board together is everybody that's on that board needs to feel important. They need to know that what they say matters, what their thoughts are taken into consideration. Mm-hmm. And for a while, I ended up stepping away for a little bit, and they kind of lost that. And their team went from like 21 members probably down to 3 because nobody had equal say. And that's the biggest thing is everybody needs to know that their opinions matter, and they need that time to talk. And when we've had these meetings, these steering committee meetings, and we've got into arguments with the state and we're going back and forth, one thing that we did do is bring a feather in as a talking piece. And we used that feather and passed it around the room, and everybody got a chance to talk. And everybody knew that when that feather was sitting on the table, that he took that, and that was respect, that you showed each other respect, and they were able, everybody had their say, and they allowed them to talk. Uh-huh. And that's the biggest thing, I guess. I don't know if I answered your question right, but
no, I think so. It feels like, you brought them together for a purpose, and they all had their different perspectives of the purpose, but you talked about the process that's needed, that level of respect and that space, respected space for everyone to contribute. So thank you, because I think we need to hear that, and that's going to be that's very valuable and treasured information. So.
And it was interesting. It was interesting too, because you had people on both sides of the spectrums, ones that, you know what I mean, but it brought them all together, and they all began to share the same vision that we're here to support the kids, and we're here to do our best to try to give them a path out of the life that they're living right now.
Right.
And I think all that just comes from people being able to be respected,
Right. We had a question submitted before we move a little further on into our successes and your game plan to overcome barriers, because I feel like we've already begun that discussion. But I wanted to backtrack a little bit. We had a question come in from Diane Whitson to please distinguish between the steering committee and the board or team that does ongoing contact with the client and advises the judge. And yes.
Our steering committee kind of oversaw how everything was being developed. And once a year, I think we have a steering committee meeting, unless there's something really bad that has come up and that we need to change right away. That steering committee team oversees the wellness board. And then once we have an issue, we run it up to the steering committee. They try to find a solution for it. And when they do, then they bring it back down to the board, and it gets implemented, or gets put to use. Mm-hmm. The board that I talk about is our wellness court board, and the wellness court board is the ones that make the decisions for the day-to-day decisions. When we refer to them as a team too, because that's kind of what we are. We kind of went from being this multi-disciplined team, or not team, but board, into a team where everybody's working together. So that's why we kind of shade those two together, but they're the same thing. And then that board has a judge that sits on that board. That board makes all the recommendations to the judge. The judge takes the recommendations, and then he takes them in the courtroom and hands them out to the kids. So that's kind of the difference between the steering committee and the board.
Great.
If that makes sense, unless you need me.
It does. What is the size of the team that sits with the judge?
That varies. At one point in time, it was over 21 people that we had sitting on the table. Right now, I'd say we're probably down to about 12 or 13 that are sitting there now. And that depends too. It depends on when, how many people can get away from their day-to-day thing to get there, But it's
pretty regularly we at least got 12 at the table. Two probation officers, ICW.
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear that last part.
No, I just mumbled it.
Yeah, he was just naming off who was all there, but it's usually two. There's usually 2 lawyers, 2 probation officers, a couple from ICW, or case managers,
2 police,
a couple police officers.
3 probation officers.
Well, there's actually 3 probation
officers. 2 to 3 attorneys, depending on who can get there.
We also have a defense attorney that sits on the team too.
And are you able to reach good group consensus on things, or does that size of group ever pose a challenge?
No, they actually do really well, especially with the emails. A lot of the time, if they're out of the office, and we have little code names for if I need a reply back from everybody ASAP, I get it by the end of the day, typically. I'd say at least 85% of them. If not, the next morning I'll have the other 3 or 4. But they stay up to date on it. They know that, if I'm just updating the team on just some news, I'll put updates. But if I need feedback in my subject headline, I'll put, need reply ASAP, and I get it. So they keep an eye out for them.
So you have your own internal team procedures to keep everybody on track with what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about successes and your game plan to overcome barriers. We talked about when we were first developing these slides, it was the end of basketball season. And so we've got a basketball picture in there, point guard running the plays. So we know that even the best laid plays we outline, sometimes we have to be flexible and make changes. So I was just wondering, you've shared a lot already in terms of overcoming barriers, but what were some of those biggest barriers, and how did you overcome them?
I guess some of the biggest barriers we have is just the silos from each department and from the state and from, it's unbelievable. You have chemical dependency that won't share with the Rule 25 assessors what's going, the Rule 25 assessors won't share with chemical dependency. Mental health won't talk to chemical dependency. Mental health don't talk to our courts. We have the state that didn't want to talk to the tribe because of the, barriers that are there. And I think just showing that, these silos are kind of ridiculous, that we need to tear those things down and be able to share information back and forth fluently, quickly. That was our biggest barrier. And sometimes that barrier comes back up. Sometimes we get a department that gets a little bit mad about something that didn't go their way, and that silo will start building. And once you see it, you got to get right back in there and say, hey, we need to knock that thing back down because it's not helping. It's creating more issues than what it is, helping the kids. And the kids are the main concern. Our attitudes and our egos And that stuff needs to be checked at the door. You need to just step in and realize the client is what you're there for, and they're the ones that need that help. But knocking down those barriers, that silo effect, that was something that we had to deal with.
That's great. Yeah, it is. It's so vital and so important. That affects so many lives when we work in those silos, and so it's great that you're able to overcome those barriers and be conscious of it.
On our adolescent side, our programming here, we moved our Rule 25 assessors, the Circle Back program. We moved Whiter's adolescents outpatient program. We put juvenile healing and wellness court, the DIY program, all in the same building. And my thinking on that is if we get everybody under the same building, under the same roof, and you're able to see each other every day and communicate with each other every day, they realize that, hey, they're not all bad people that work for this program, you know. And once we got everybody under the same roof and they were able to talk every day, visit, it's made 110% difference in the silos. Now you come in and our wellness people are talking with our outpatient people, and the outpatient people are talking to our Circle Back program, and the information's just circling around in here. It's crazy how big of a difference that makes just by putting people under the same roof and where they could communicate and talk to each other instead of having them output in different buildings throughout the res, you know.
The kids don't have a dance anymore. Because they would almost play. I mean, they could tell, you know, and if substance abuse was not getting along with mental health, if there was a discrepancy where we were trying to get information and they knew that, you know what, there's a hold on it, they knew it, and they'd play it.
Right.
But with us, everybody working together now, you can't get by us anymore.
Then the other thing I think I kind of forgot to mention too is the relationship we built with our juvenile centers. We have 3 different juvenile centers that the counties utilize, and we built some good relationships with those people to where they communicate with us on the kids' behavior when they're in lockup. We worked extra hard to when the kid goes off to a placement somewhere, whether it's mental health or ICW placement or whatever, we go out and build that relationship with that facility or that foster home and let them know that we're here to support them, you know. And that's really helped. So when the child's released and he's coming back here, we've already got his aftercare set up. We have mental health on board, knowing that they're going to be back within 2 weeks, so there's no service gaps. It's just been awesome that way. Before, we'd have months. I'm not kidding. We had one kid that came into our program that had severe mental health, and it was 2 months by the time she got mental health services. And now I would say it's maybe 2 weeks at the most.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big difference in helping some of these kids too, because they just fall through the cracks if they didn't get those services right away.
Right. Mm-hmm. Great.
So for some further words of wisdom, I wanted to share with participants that you have offered a PowerPoint that is the download pod, and it is an overview of your program and basically outlines a lot of the discussion from today. And so if participants want to download that PowerPoint, that will offer them an outline of the services and many of the talking points that we've had today, and we want to leave time for questions. Thank you. So if you have a question, we want to invite you to take this time to ask our speakers anything that's been on your mind or something that's come up that you would like more clarification about, or any questions that you have about a Healing to Wellness court. Roy had his hand up. If you'd like to unmute your phone.
Okay, Helen Gregorio, do you have a question? please unmute your phone and ask your question? Oh, looks like they were trying out the hand raise feature. So that's great that we got that figured out. So please let us know that if you have a question for our presenters or even for the good of the group, please do so.
And you're also welcome to type your question in the chat box if you prefer to not unmute. You're welcome to type in the chat box and we will read your question for you. And I see that some people are typing questions right now.
Your support from tribal leadership.
Okay, I see we have a question about how do you maintain support from tribal leadership? How do you engage your tribal leadership?
We have tremendous support from our tribal leadership. They actually have a drug task force set up that we're part of, and our tribal council sits on that drug task force, and they receive updates from us, I'd say once, at least monthly, about the program and everything that we're doing. But they've been a tremendous support of the program.
Would you say that when our tribal leadership has good outcomes to look at, which equals good information, they can continue to support and make those decisions that support what you're doing?
Yes. And they receive that. In our tribal council, we have a real bad drug problem up here with heroin and methamphetamine, and they're doing their best to try to combat that. They have put together this task force where all these people come in and they meet and they keep up on it, and they make sure that we're out doing what we need to do. And getting their support is not hard when you're out after things. You know, you're out doing what you're supposed to do. You know.
I see a question from Eulalia. I understand that you are a PL 280 state. Do you get referrals from other neighboring tribes?
No, we haven't received any from any other outside tribes.
Okay. And what about approximately how many other jurisdictions do you receive referrals from right now?
We receive referrals from Clearwater County, Monongalia County. We've actually had a couple come in from the U.S. Marshals Service. They've referred a couple kids into the program. But mainly it's just the counties and state, or counties within our boundaries.
Okay.
And state probation.
Okay. I have another question. What is the cost of GPS house arrest ankle bracelets that you use in your program?
It runs us about $8 a day to run the GPS monitoring systems. And then we do our own, we worked out an agreement with the company that we do our own monitoring of them. So when the kids, if they cut them off, they do anything, we get text messages sent right to our phone, and then we're able to bring up their monitoring system, and we pretty much do what they're supposed to do. So that's why we ended up getting a little bit better rate of $8 a day.
Mm-hmm. So just as a quick follow-up to that question, has that method of monitoring been beneficial, or have you seen success with that method of monitoring?
It's helped out a lot, especially in phase one, when the clients are coming in and they're just starting to quit using. They're having issues with substance abuse or alcohol or something like that, or running away or doing whatever, just doing those types of things. It's really helpful. It keeps them at home.
Teaches them accountability.
Teaches them accountability. It teaches them, and then we're there UAing them and checking them and making sure that they're following through with what they're up to.
So while you're monitoring, you're heavily mentoring and engaging as well. So it's not just placing them in the home with a monitor. It's knowing where they are so that you can continue that ongoing interaction with them.
Yep. And once they get started in the program, as like David said earlier, now we're doing the weekends, the Friday and Saturdays. So you put that with their 2 days of intensive outpatient. We have pretty much 4 to 5 days a week contact with these kids where we're seeing them 4 to 5 times a week. And we're bringing them in for different programs. So it's just basically in the evenings, you know, where typically they're going to be running around and, you know, not at home. Now we're teaching them that they need to be at home. And again, we ran into it where, you know, that's almost worse for the kid because there's, you know, home life may not be all that glamorous with drugs or alcohol in the family, and that's a report to ICW. You know, so then that's where we start working with more of the family because it's not just the kid that's got the problems.
Right. We have a question in a different line of questioning, and how often do you have court hearings, and also how often do you have advisory meetings?
Our court hearings are every other Wednesday. They're every 2 weeks. Our advisory meetings are the same day. We staff before court to get together our board, and they make decisions from the updates that these guys are doing in real time through email. So every time Kelly and Felicia are out doing something with the youth, if they pick them up at their house, they bring them here for outpatient or they bring them here for a weekend, they send out an email to the team, so they're just constantly updated. And then when we go to court, we have a staffing before court, and if they're going to get a sanction or if they're going to get an incentive, it's all decided right there.
So does your staff assist with transportation to and from court if necessary?
Yes. The majority of our kids, we have a hard time. We have a hard time getting parent involvement. There's either no vehicles or the families are using, or there's something going on where they can't make it to court, so we do transport a lot. We transport probably 9 out of 10 clients.
So that is a major component of the program, is providing them the way to get back and forth from the court process.
And then we also, like our weekends that we open up from 2 to 10 at night, we go around and pick all the kids up and bring them here to the building. And then they do cultural activities with them, or volleyball, or take them to powwows, take them to fairs, they take them swimming, they do all kinds of things like that with them too. So transportation is a big deal. Spend a lot of money on transportation.
I have a question from Evan Elkin. What feedback do you get from the young people about their experience with the program?
Give this a go.
The kids that come in and are committed to changing their life around, they love the program. And they're a big asset because they help out, you know, the other kids see and hear from them. The kids that are kind of on the fence with if they're ready to turn around or turn their life around, that's kind of up in the air because, you know, if we're against them, then it's, you know, it's the worst thing ever. But if they're doing if they're on the right track and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it's a good program. If they're getting the incentives, but, you know, if we sanction a kid, then we're the bad guys. But I'd say we have more positive than negative feedback in the community with other kids. I've, in fact, gone to schools and, like Dave said, I'll have kids that I have no idea who they are. How do I get into your program?
Are you seeing reduced recidivism rates from their participation in this program?
Yes, we are.
And we have one more question from Roy. From start to finish, how many months does your program run? Meaning, how long before a client graduates?
Well, the best case scenario is 6 to 9 months. If a kid comes through, their mental health issues are low, they don't have any, and we're able to get them through the chemical dependency side, it'll take up to 6 to 9 months. And we've had a few kids do that. We've also had kids staying here for a year. maybe a little over a year because of the constant placements that we've had to put them in, where like their chemical use history or their chemical use is really high. They're into meth. I mean, we got kids in this program that are 12 years old that are using meth and heroin already, and at times it takes a while to get them away from that addiction. So they end up having to go away to a treatment center for a while and then come back. Same way on the mental health issue. If you have a kid that is FASD or they're having some major mental health issues, it takes a little bit longer to get them through the program.
Mm-hmm.
We've run into times where with FASD kids that we've talked about doing a special track just for them and shortening up that time, and just to be able to give them some sort of accomplishment, because if in the 6 to 9 month program it seems like it's a little too drawn out for them. They just can't keep it together that long. But ideally 6 to 9 months.
Well, I'm looking at our time, and we want to leave time for our participants to take part in the survey, and but I think we have time to take one more question, and so we're going to Paulette Reddingwolf, what are the most critical factors that must be in place prior to opening your doors of your juvenile healing and wellness court? So if you could briefly in the next couple of minutes talk about some of those, maybe the top 2 critical factors that need to be in place.
To me, I'd have to say it's your board, getting all your members together on the same page and be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the first thing popped in my head. I mean, it's very crucial. Without, like I said, there's your case managers, but just having everybody together and everybody ready, and
right.
having your, I mean, it's going to be via emails, let them know how important it is that you get responses back, and have everybody, it's a commitment to being in here, but at the end of the day, everybody kind of makes each person's job a little bit easier.
And on the development side, I think you need to hire someone that has a little bit of passion to want to work with the kids and get out there and do all that legwork. It's not fun running to all the courts and doing all that stuff. And I'm not the guy that likes to dress up in suits and go places, but I have to do all that. And it's that's the main thing, is just get out there and be honest with people and follow through.
Right. It kind of comes back to reflecting on some of our words of encouragement. I think I've heard you exemplify those words of encouragement through your presentation, and that's been very successful in supporting the success of your program. Having that balance, being honorable, graceful, giving, fearless, empowerment, and perseverant. So I want to thank you for that. So at this time, again, we thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. We have some important web links here for everybody that's joining. We have our OJJDP Tribal Youth TA Center YouTube channel where we have all of our webinars archived, and it includes the Strategic Planning Toolkit webinar series. That's been a monthly ongoing series. And we also have our survey, so we're going to invite you. We're leaving a couple of minutes here for you. We invite you to come and fill out our survey and help us improve our trainings and things that we're offering out to Indian Country as we continue to do this work together. And so please utilize Internet Explorer. It seems to work, that browser seems to work better for our survey. Anna, is there anything else that we need to add?
I just wanted to let participants know that if they missed any part of today's discussion, that this webinar will be archived and will be on the YouTube channel. So you're welcome to check the webinar out later, and if there was something you wanted to go back and review, please go to the YouTube channel and you can re-listen to this as many times as you want. And I wanted to close this out, and I just wanted to thank the team from White Earth Nation and thank Dave and Kelly for giving their time. We prepared for this session because we know that it's good to listen to people who have been through developing processes and knowing their experience and being able to lean on those people when we need to. And Dave and Kelly have graciously offered their availability for outreach. So if you have questions, you can contact the TA Center. We are happy to link you up with them. And we can also share any of the materials that were presented today as downloads. We're going to have those available also. And so, Dave and Kelly, I just want to thank you from us and from all the participants. Thank you for your time and thank you for your commitment. And I appreciate so much that you shared with us today. And so with that, we're going to close out, and everybody have a good day.